The glass of champagne trembled slightly in my hand as my son's new wife leaned in, smiling for every camera in the room. Her lips barely moved. "Do us all a favor," she murmured, "and vanish from this family for good." Nobody else heard it. Nobody else saw the moment my whole world cracked open on my son's wedding night. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I set my glass down on the nearest table, turned, and walked out into the night air alone. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I answered with 4 words. Then I walked back inside like nothing had happened. What came next would change everything. For my son, for his bride, and for a family that was about to learn exactly what loyalty really costs. My name is Helen Marsh. I'm 62 years old, and for over 3 decades, I built my career as an estate attorney, guiding families through the messy, painful process of protecting what they'd spent lifetimes building. Wills, trusts, businesses, homes. I thought I understood every way a family could fracture. I never imagined it would be mine. My husband, Robert, died 9 years ago after a brutal fight with cancer. After that, my son Daniel became my entire reason for getting up every morning. Raising him into a good, steady man, the kind of man his father would have been proud of, became the only thing that mattered to me. When Daniel brought Claire home 2 years ago, I welcomed her like she was already family. She was sharp, charming, endlessly polite. She called me Mom before there was even a ring on her finger. She hugged me tight after every dinner. Looking back now, I understand. Every bit of it was a performance. As the wedding drew closer, small things began to shift. Sunday dinners disappeared. Old traditions were suddenly outdated. Whenever I offered help, Claire would smile that same practiced smile and tell me they wanted to build something just for the 2 of them. Daniel repeated her words like they were his own. I noticed. I said nothing. I told myself love meant staying quiet. The wedding day itself was stunning. A ballroom overlooking a still lake, white roses on every table. My son grinning like he'd never known worry. Watching him that happy, I told myself every sacrifice had been worth it. But all evening, I saw things Daniel didn't. Claire snapping at the waitstaff the moment his back was turned, rolling her eyes at his aunt for asking about grandchildren, dismissing his father's oldest friends with a tight temporary smile. Then, just after dinner, she touched my arm. "Helen, could I steal you for a second?" We stepped into the hallway together, laughter still spilling out from the ballroom behind us. And that's when she said it. The words that stopped my heart. That the kindest thing I could do for my son was disappear from his life completely. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply walked outside, took out my phone, and made one call. Neither Claire, nor anyone else in that ballroom, had any idea what that single phone call had just set into motion. I slipped back into the ballroom before anyone noticed I'd been gone. The band was still playing. Guests were still laughing. Claire and Daniel were making their rounds, thanking people table by table, glowing like nothing in the world was wrong. If anyone looked my way, they saw exactly what I wanted them to see. A proud mother, soaking in her son's big day. Inside, I was breaking apart. Claire caught my eye from across the room. She smiled at me, almost victorious, then wrapped her arm around Daniel like nothing had happened at all. He smiled back at her, completely unaware. That part hurt more than anything she'd whispered in the hallway. For the next 20 minutes, I did what I've always done best. I held it together. I posed for photos. I hugged relatives. I laughed at the right moments. 35 years in law had taught me one unshakable rule. Never make a decision while your emotions are driving. Then my phone buzzed once against my palm. On my way. 20 minutes. That single line was all I needed. Years before Robert passed, we sat together for months, planning for Daniel's future. In my career, I'd watched too many families torn apart the moment money landed in the wrong hands before wisdom did. So instead of leaving everything to Daniel outright, Robert and I placed our family's assets, the investment properties, his business shares, and the lake house where Daniel spent every childhood summer fishing with his father, into a carefully managed trust. We told Daniel only that it would come to him when the time was right. What Daniel never knew was that his father had left one more thing behind: a private letter to the trustee. If it ever became clear that someone was trying to cut Daniel off from the people who truly loved him, all distributions were to be paused immediately. No exceptions, until the situation could be reviewed. That was the call I'd made in that hallway. Not out of spite, not to ruin anyone's night, simply to honor the one promise Robert and I had made each other years before he died. Across the room, I overheard Claire chatting with two of her friends, champagne in hand. "Daniel's family has this gorgeous lake house," she laughed. "We're already talking about remodeling next spring. I have so many ideas." One of her friends leaned in. "Isn't there some kind of family property too?" Claire grinned wider. "Let's just say there won't be much standing in our way." I looked down at my glass and said nothing. But I wasn't the only one who'd heard her. A few of Robert's oldest friends exchanged a look across the table. The kind of look that says, "Did you hear that too?" Then the ballroom doors opened. A tall man in a navy suit stepped through, a leather briefcase in hand, moving with the unhurried calm of someone who had delivered difficult news 100 times before. I recognized him instantly. So did he. He nodded toward me as he crossed the room. Claire's confident smile faltered. The first crack I'd seen in it all night. His name was Arthur Bellamy. He was the independent trustee Robert and I had appointed years earlier, long before any of this began. He stopped at our table. "Helen," he said gently. "I came as fast as I could." Nearby guests turned to look. Claire forced a smile onto her face. "I'm sorry. Are you a family friend?" "In a manner of speaking," Arthur said. Then he turned to my son. "I won't take much of your time, Daniel, but I have a legal obligation to your family's trust, and it can't wait." Daniel's brow creased. My family's trust? He'd always known something existed. He just never knew the details. Robert and I had agreed to wait until the right moment. None of us could have guessed the right moment would be his wedding reception. Arthur opened his briefcase and drew out a single sealed envelope. "Your father wrote this before he passed," he said quietly. "He asked me to protect this family's legacy, not just its money." The room had gone still. "Earlier tonight," Arthur continued, "Helen came to me with serious concerns about the direction this family was heading. Under the terms of the trust, I've suspended all future distributions until those concerns can be properly reviewed." Claire's face drained of color. "Suspended? What distributions?" Arthur's voice stayed level. "This trust was built to strengthen a family through respect and honesty. It was never meant to reward relationships built on control, or on pushing people out." Claire's eyes snapped to Daniel, then to me. "You did this," she whispered. Before I could answer, Daniel spoke first, his voice low. "What is going on? What happened?" I took a breath. "Claire asked me to leave the family. She said it would be the greatest gift I could give you on your wedding day." Every trace of color left his face. "That's not true," Claire said quickly, too quickly. Before she could say more, Daniel's Aunt Marjorie stepped forward. "I heard enough of that converse." Before she could say more, Daniel's Aunt Marjorie stepped forward. I heard enough of that conversation myself. Helen isn't lying. One of Robert's closest friends nodded beside her. Neither am I. No one gasped. No one shouted. The silence in that ballroom said more than any accusation could. Daniel turned to Claire, his eyes glassy. You wanted my mother gone? On our wedding day? She opened her mouth, and nothing came out. Claire stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom, every eye now turned toward her. She opened her mouth twice, searching for something, anything, to say. Nothing came. Daniel didn't wait for an answer. He turned away from her completely and walked straight to me instead. Mom, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I pulled my son into my arms right there in front of everyone. The guests, the band frozen mid-song. Arthur still holding his briefcase like a man who just watched a storm pass through a room. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. 9 years of raising him alone, of quietly swallowing every slight so his happiness could stay intact, came undone in that one embrace. Behind us, Claire finally found her voice, but it came out thin and desperate. Daniel, please, you're overreacting. It's our wedding night. He turned back to her, and for the first time all evening, his eyes were completely clear. You told my mother to disappear, on the one day I wanted her standing beside me most. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I don't think I'm the one overreacting. Arthur cleared his throat gently, giving the room a moment to breathe. I'll leave the two of you to sort out the rest privately, he said. The trust remains frozen until I hear otherwise from Helen. There's no rush tonight. He gave me one last nod before slipping quietly back out the ballroom doors, leaving behind a silence that somehow felt lighter than the one before. The party didn't end that night, not officially. The band eventually picked the music back up. Guests drifted back into quiet conversation, pretending, as guests do, that they hadn't just watched a marriage crack open in real time. But nothing about that reception was the same afterward. Claire spent the rest of the night at the edges of the room, her friends whispering instead of celebrating. Daniel stayed close to me, his hand never quite letting go of my arm, like he was afraid that if he looked away, I might vanish the way she'd asked me to. We didn't talk about it that night. There was too much to say, and not nearly enough calm left in either of us to say it well. But in the weeks that followed, Daniel came to me on his own, again and again, peeling back everything he'd been too blind, or too in love, to see. The canceled dinners, the traditions Claire had called old-fashioned, the comments he'd brushed off as jokes that were never really jokes at all. He didn't ask me to hate her. I never did. I'd spent 35 years watching families come apart at the seams, and I knew better than most that anger doesn't rebuild anything. It just burns whatever's left standing. So instead, I simply stayed steady. I answered his calls. I listened when he needed to talk, and stayed quiet when he needed silence instead. I let him find his own way back to solid ground. 6 months later, Daniel and I sat together at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd done his homework as a boy, where Robert used to read the paper every Sunday morning. The marriage hadn't survived, not in the end. But something else had. Us. Our family, quietly rebuilding itself one honest conversation at a time. The trust Robert and I had built years earlier stayed exactly where it belonged, protected, patient, waiting for Daniel to be ready. Not because I wanted to control his life, but because his father had understood something long before any of this happened. That legacy was never really about money at all. It was about making sure the people you loved never lost each other chasing it. Claire believed the greatest gift I could give my son was walking away and disappearing from his life forever. She never once imagined that the real gift I had to give was something far simpler. making sure our family never lost itself in the first place.